On the sidelines of the 77th UN General Assembly, currently underway in New York, African heads of state and decision makers will also convene at the conference, driving a social entrepreneurship agenda for Africa today. It's expected that they will discuss the role of social entrepreneurship in reducing poverty, inequality and joblessness towards achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals in Africa. Our Minister of Social Development, Lindiwe Zulu, is taking part in that, and she joins us now from New York. Minister, thank you. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much, Leanne, and my apology for my sleepy face. It's 1 a.m. in New York, as it is, but here I am, and thank you for giving us this opportunity.
I think it's so important to find out what it is that the message that we have sent there, and I do know that the International Relations Minister actually addressed the UN a few hours ago, not too long ago. I've actually been trying to look for it, or just to hear a few things. Isn't out as yet. I mean, it probably is there. I just haven't had a chance to look at it. But perhaps you can tell us, how did it go? What was the message that she went to the podium with?
Thank you very much. As you are aware, she is representing South Africa from an international perspective. And as you are aware, South Africa is always one country that has been very consistent in terms of sending messages of peace, security and stability, but South Africa is also one of the countries that calls upon the entire world to create a conducive environment for citizens, global citizens, to really be able to live in peace, security and stability. But of course, she represents South Africa and the current challenges that South Africa itself faces, both nationally and globally. That is the key message that comes from the Minister of International Relations.
I note that some of the messages was, you know, I mean, I'm just seeing from what Rwanda's President Paul Kagame was also saying, just in terms of there needs to be more cooperation between the world and Africa, and that was very much so highlighted on a health level, and that what can be achieved when that cooperation comes. So obviously lots of issues, but in terms of health and food insecurity, because that's another issue that I can imagine that is also right on top of the agenda.
Yes, particularly if you consider the fact that we've just come out of COVID, even though it's still lingering in many countries. We've come out of COVID and the impact that COVID has had on our economies, but also the economies of the African continent, and the fact that we had serious challenges from a point of view of getting vaccines, and we saw for ourselves how the global world and the developed world can be able to take care of itself and sometimes take more care of itself, and does not consider the African continent very much. We almost seem to be like second-class citizens. But as the African continent, what is important is we have been united in terms of ensuring that we share our own best practices from the African continent, but we're also looking towards the future of what else can we be able to do collectively as the continent, including taking care of times when we have such global challenges. What is it that we can do united as leaders to make sure that we take advantage of the opportunities within ourselves as the African continent and the different countries, and in particular, the different regions. The economies of the African continent, like everywhere else, have not been doing very well, but it is possible for us to unite and work together and see what is it that we can do in regional integration, in economic integration, a wide range of issues that are related to ensuring that we unite, using the African Union in particular, and using the regional economic development structures that we have, just taking advantage of the population of the African continent and development, but ensuring that we work with each other in a united way.
Yeah. Minister, one of the other big things, and I do hear this, and this is something that I do hope is something that the world does take into account. We had our the AU president standing up and speaking as well, and talking very much so, Macky Sall, the Senegalese president and the chairperson of the African Union, saying that Africa, the Union, should be granted a seat within the G20 so that Africa can make decisions that affect 1.4 billion Africans. I mean, this is an absolutely, it's almost brain-numbing to think that we do not have that voice within such a major decision maker.
Leanne, you know very well that South Africa in particular has been pushing for this agenda for a very long time. And you know that South Africa has played a very important role, first and foremost, in the formation of the AU, from the OAU to the AU. And we know very well that South Africa, through President Cyril Ramaphosa and Minister Naledi Pandor, have crisscrossed the world, engaged world leaders, because who ignores a continent like Africa, and who ignores the future? Because if you look at what is happening from a developmental point of view, and the fact that Africa is a very young continent from a developmental point of view, no one should ignore Africa, but we know the history. We know why Africa keeps on being ignored. We will not give up on it, and that's why people like Macky Sall would be able to stand up at that platform and continue to call for this, which we have done for years and years. And we are hoping that this time around, Africa's voice shall be heard.
Perhaps you want to talk to us a little bit about social entrepreneurship ecosystem in Africa and what it actually entails.
Thank you very much, Leanne. I would like also to indicate the fact that South Africa, through the Department of Social Development, but also through the Department of Small Business Development, myself and Minister Ndabeni-Abrahams are participating in this discussion this morning. And as you might be aware, Leanne, we need to create jobs, and we need to find ways and means of creating jobs from an African perspective. But of course, we are here as South Africa because myself as a Minister of Social Development have been introducing this topic of social entrepreneurship into the Department of Social Development in collaboration with the Department of Small Business Development, because it is important that we create a conducive environment for your small and medium enterprises and informal businesses. And of course, the Department of Social Development has got SASA, where we know that we pay almost 18 million people. And among the people that are paid social grants are young people, and young women in particular, who have children, because the bigger grant that we pay is that of children. And therefore, we're looking at ways and means of ensuring that some of these women, as far as possible, can be empowered to do their own businesses, whether it is cooperatives, whether it's enterprises, or any way that they can be able to sustain their livelihoods through ensuring that they are empowered and they get up and do things for themselves. So when the UNDP had the engagement with ourselves, we also invited the Department of Small Business Development, because they are, and this is their core responsibility, and we need to work with them in partnership to make sure that we empower our communities, and we empower economic development in the townships, in rural areas. And that is why we are here participating in the African approach to ensuring that we introduce social entrepreneurship across the board and in the African continent. But from a South African perspective, we have been in engagement with the UNDP. We've also been in engagement with the small business development. And that's why I said Minister Ndabeni-Abrahams is also here with me to participate at this international platform, but focused on the African continent.
Yeah, it certainly will. But I mean, I think one of the biggest hamperings right now to all of that, there are many, but I mean, as you know, the reason the president was not there is obviously because of the electricity situation back home, and the fact that many South Africans are sitting in the dark, never mind growing a business. You cannot grow a business. And we talk about township economy. These things are impossible with even the basic electricity to help out. I mean, we're talking to water shortages, we're talking to cell phone networks, all of these things are being hampered. Is this under discussion, the power crisis on the continent? I mean, it's something that we need addressed urgently.
Yes, Leanne, it's very unfortunate, obviously, and I can imagine your small and medium enterprises and the difficulties that they encounter. I mean, as a matter of fact, my daughter is a fashion designer, and she's been bitterly complaining to me about the fact that she's got work that she needs to do. She needs to make the clothes, the weddings and all that. And when there's no electricity, it becomes very difficult for her to meet her targets. And therefore, the discussion, and I think it's the reason why President Cyril Ramaphosa had to rush back home so that he can be able to take charge of the processes, of course, together with the relevant ministers, to work and see how else can we manage to improve the situation, because millions of rands are being lost for small and medium enterprises. But I am confident, Leanne, that a solution will be found, and a solution must be found so that our people can be able, because it's one thing when we call upon them to improve the economy and make sure that we support your small and medium enterprises, but then only to find that when that opportunity presents itself, they are confronted with these challenges. This is a broader problem for the African continent and for South Africa in particular when it comes to infrastructure development. And part of the discussions that will take place today is about infrastructure development, because without the proper infrastructure development, whether we're talking about electricity, we're talking about water, we're talking about transport, we're talking about roads and so forth, we can only develop and we can only support our entrepreneurs if we make sure that we create that conducive environment for them. So this discussion will take place there because, again, South Africa is and belongs to the African continent, and these are challenges that are faced by the entire continent. But our focus as South Africa really is to say what else needs to be done to create that conducive environment for entrepreneurship in South Africa. And social entrepreneurship is a new concept for us in South Africa, but it settles very well when you think of the fact that the majority of our people do not have jobs, and in particular young people do not have jobs. So we need to be able to share those experiences and what is happening with other countries so that we can also ensure that in South Africa, people have the capacity. We're going to be talking also about the value chains in particular, to see that even if people are involved in businesses, in South Africa, we've got a problem of monopoly and monopolized value chain processes, so that small and medium enterprises and new entrepreneurs, they find it very difficult to break into that space.
All right, Minister, I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to let you go to bed. I know it's now 20 to 2 in the morning. Go sleep for a couple of minutes, because I'm sure you're up again bright and early to start the next session.
Thank you, Leanne. We've got work to do.
You have. We thank you. That's our Social Development Minister out in New York at the UN General Assembly, Lindiwe Zulu.